literally just turned my deck into a Vanity's Fiend deck. So this helps me draw out a Vanity's Fiend. This kills all the Salamangreat traps. And then this is the win con.
What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, giving you guys another quick card discussion on a nice piece of side deck tech that popped up at YCS Atlanta. This is a card that has been around for ages, but it always feels like it kind of comes in and out of formats, and now it feels like it's actually seeing a legitimate resurgence in the meta. In fact, even the highly respected Acepcion played this card in his side deck of his Danger Thunder Dragon build for Atlanta that he took as far as 3rd place, and he even said that this was essentially the win condition when he brought it in. This card is Vanity's Fiend, and a lot of you guys might remember this, especially when Domain Monarchs were, a thing and they were at full power. A lot of Domain Monarch players opted to either run this card in their main deck or maybe even side it in certain matchups. Vanity's Fiend has always been an incredibly solid card in my opinion, but it's been one that is kind of like meta or format dependent. In some formats it's really good, in some formats it feels like it's just completely irrelevant, and the card has never really seen consistent play for long stretches at a time, but right now it's coming back to the forefront. I actually have first-hand experience with this card because if you guys do not know, Round 2 at YCS Atlanta, I played against another Yu-Gi-Tuber, Simply Slim Yu-Gi-Oh! He sided it in while playing Danger Thunder Dragons against my Salamangreats. He got it on field, and I just had absolutely no answer to it. It completely thrashed me. I couldn't get it off the board. I couldn't get over it, and basically it single-handedly won him the game. And I want to talk about why it's good in certain matchups and where you can play it, etc., etc. So for starters, I think that without a doubt, the best home for Vanity's Fiend has to be in Danger Thunder Dragon. If you look at the makeup of this deck, they do not really have that many normal summons, although their normal summons are super impactful, like Batteryman Solar and Phantom Skyblaster. I think it's perfectly fine sacrificing the token producing power of those cards and the playmaking power of those cards to essentially just have a card that's going to shut your opponent down completely and not allow them to special summon at all. When you look at the Danger Thunder Dragon deck, I mean, most of it is basically extender cards, and every single one of those extender monsters can serve as fodder to get a Vanity's Fiend on field, whether it be as simple as activating a danger monster, discarding some random card in your hand, summoning the danger monster, boom, you can distribute that danger monster for Vanity's Fiend, or it can be Defrag Dragon, White or Black Dragon, etc., etc. There are so many easy ways of getting this card on board, although there are a couple of other decks you can run Vanity's Fiend in. I'll talk about those a little later in the video. Now, one of the matchups that these Vanity's Fiend players are targeting is obviously Salamangreats. Our deck is so susceptible to this card, and it's because we really don't have any big inherent beaters. The deck pretty much kind of tops out at 1800, and even if you're playing something like Foul or obviously the standard Jaguar, when you combine that with Spinny, that's only 2300 attack. It's not the 2400 attack necessary that you would need to crash into a Vanity's Fiend and have both monsters off the field. So Salamangreats don't really have any ways of attacking over a Vanity's Fiend that's already on the field. And really, if you look at the archetype, essentially we only play one inherent out to the card, and that would be Salamangreat Rage. The problem with that is it's a one of in the deck, so if you basically don't hard draw the card, you're essentially just stuck being beat down by it.
So I just wanted to maximize going second. So it may look weird, but I don't side Vanity's Fiend going first. I decided going second against Salamangreat. So the idea is you break their board, and then you just tribute for a Vanity's Fiend, and then you just say, you better have it. And 9 times out of 10, they just don't have it.
And even if you're going second against Salamangreats, it's still perfectly fine to side in Vanity's Fiend against them. That's because most of the time when a Salamangreat player is going to combo out, they're going to drop Roar into the graveyard before they drop Rage with Gazelle. And that's just because, obviously, Roar is just a lot more versatile of a card. It hits a lot more things. So even if your opponent does have that Roar turn 1, all you have to do is essentially bait it out with one of your extenders, or you can force it out with a Nightmare Unicorn. Usually you want to summon it to Sunlight Wolf's link point, so they basically have to pick and choose if they want to use Roar or if they want to use the Sunlight Wolf. They cannot use both, and at that point all you got to do is just drop the Vanity's Fiend using another extender and simply attack over the Mirage Stallion. Now if you get rid of the Mirage Stallion, even if your opponent has the Sunlight Wolf and a copy of the Jaguar on field, it doesn't really do anything because your opponent is basically sitting on 2 1800 attack monsters. They're never going to be able to link summon into anything bigger than your Vanity's Fiend. And again, even if they happen to have access to Spinny, it won't matter because they're going to be capped out at 2300 attack while you have 2400 attack, and you don't need to commit any more cards to the field. As long as you have like one other beater on board, you're essentially just going to break your opponent's Salamangreat defenses, and they'll never be able to establish anything else. Let's also talk about in the mirror match. This is where I think the card can also shine as well. I kind of feel like if you're playing a Danger Thunder Dragon mirror match and you happen to drop Vanity's Fiend, quite frankly, I have not come up with any outs that the deck actually has to it. So I kind of feel like if you drop the Vanity's Fiend against your opponent, you're playing the same deck. Your opponent's basically just going to look at their hand and then scoop. We already know that the Danger Thunder Dragon deck doesn't run a whole lot of spells and traps because they do consistently run Seconds Light. So they're not going to be bringing in any actual field remover. They're not going to have any type of effect negation cards. And I feel like there just really isn't an out in that matchup. So it's kind of like go first, drop Vanity's Fiend on your opponent, and then your opponent's never going to be able to actually establish a board, and basically you just win. Now, one of the things that I really like about Vanity's Fiend right now is it honestly feels like the card is almost immune to just about all of the commonly played hand traps in the Yu-Gi-Oh meta, whether it be Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, which has gotten incredibly popular over the last couple of weeks, Ash Blossom and Joy Springs, Effect Veiler. None of those cards can do anything. They're basically completely useless against a Vanity's Fiend that's already established on the board. In fact, the only real hand trap that stops the card is the literal hand trap that is Infinite Impermanence. Infinite Impermanence obviously can be activated if you're going second from your hand. You can simply negate the Vanity's Fiend and you can play on like it wasn't even there. The same thing kind of goes if you have it set on the field. You can flip it over during your turn and do the same thing. But if you guys have noticed, over probably the last 3 or so weeks, Infinite Impermanence's play has actually seen a decline. More people are running Effect Veiler as that 3 of in the deck. I'm not exactly sure if people are waiting for the reprint and dual power or what, but I do know that Impermanence is not seeing quite as much play, and Effect Veiler just doesn't cut it against this card. Yeah, you can technically Effect Veiler it if you're playing a deck like Salamangreats, but the thing is that will only allow you to turn off the Vanity's Fiend during your opponent's turn. What significant special summon is Salamangreat going to do during the opponent's turn? I think that it's also really good if your opponent does happen to side cards against you, just kind of like good generic cards. These can be things like Pancatrops or Super Polymerization. Kaijus are commonly still played in Yu-Gi-Oh! None of those cards can be used or activated in any way as long as you have Vanity's Fiend already on the field. Your opponent has a Pancatrops, it's just sitting in their hand dead the entire time. Sky Striker players routinely will bring in Super Polymerization against Thunder Dragon players. Well, that can't be activated because you cannot special summon at all. And then Kaijus also are special summons. So unlike the Winged Dragon or Spirit mode, you are not able to basically out the Vanity's Fiend. You're not going to be able to tribute that to drop like a Kaiju. And speaking of Ray Dot deck, let's talk about this card being brought in against the Sky Striker matchup, specifically from a Danger Thunder Dragon standpoint. I know some of you guys are going to be like, Cap G, you are crazy. You're going off the deep end. That is so unorthodox and unconventional, but just follow me for a second. I feel like one of the reasons that Danger Thunder Dragon will lose to Sky Striker is because you can have Colossus on field, but a lot of times what the Sky Striker player will do is they'll try to stall the game out. They'll try to go for Hayate, drop things like Widow Anchor into the graveyard, and then get the Widow Anchor with the Kagari and, kind of stall from there. If you only have one Colossus on field, they can negate it, then they can actually like start playing. However, if you were able to drop a Colossus plus a copy of Vanity's Fiend, well, now your opponent never gets access to Hayate. Now your opponent will obviously never be able to go for Kagari, and your opponent will never be able to search. It feels like at that point, your opponent has to actually hard draw and open with the copies of Afterburner and or Widow Anchor. Otherwise, you're basically just going to kill them in a couple of turns. This is one of the reasons why I think that we see Salamangreats play Artifact Scythe and they lose to Sky Strikers a lot of times. They think that it's going to be an auto win, right? But the Sky Striker player will just normal summon Kagari, or excuse me, normal summon Ray. They'll link summon during the Salamangreat player's turn, and then you kind of have to beat through all of these floating monsters, and it feels like the Sky Striker player wasn't all that affected. But if you stop them from ever being able to link summon to begin with, all of the things that kind of snowball and they kind of stall and all of the resources that they get to kind of feels like that never can actually happen. So as crazy as this sounds, I actually feel like Vanity's Fiend can be a nice little addition if you're playing against the Sky Striker matchup, but this is again 100% conditional on you being able to drop a Thunder Dragon Colossus as well, because if you're allowing them to just search all their cards and search all their Afterburners and Widow Anchors, then they're going to be able to out your Vanity's Fiend very easily. if you got the Colossus on field plus Vanity's Fiend, it's going to be really rough for Sky Strikers. Now, the last thing that I do want to end on is some other decks that you guys can consider running Vanity's Fiend in. And yes, this is definitely outside of the tier 1 meta, but I definitely feel like this card has always been good in Burning Abyss. In fact, historically, we've seen this card ran in Burning Abyss because it is super easy to drop. Burning Abyss are not super normal summon reliant. Obviously, any of the BA monsters can just special summon themselves, and then you can drop Vanity's Fiend. And if you're going first against a Danger Thunder Dragon deck, or, as I explained earlier, Salamangreats, it's basically just a free win at that point if they don't happen to have something like Infinite and Permanent. The same thing can be said about even something like Mermill, right? Mermill are a deck where if you're running Swap Frog is an inherent special summon. You contribute that Swap Frog. Yeah, you are basically taking a neg 2, but again, you're getting that win condition on board turn 1. And the same thing can be said if you open with like an Abystius or a Megalo. Megalo will obviously be pitching a lot of cards, but if you're pitching Dragoons, you're recovering those cards, you're getting Vanity's Fiend on field, and you're just in a really good position. And it's just so hard to stall against the card because people don't play high defense monsters anymore. It just feels like those days of Yu-Gi-Oh are kind of dead. So I kind of feel like this card is really good. Maybe people are starting to realize how strong it is, and if you're not completely normal summon reliant in your deck, I think that you might want to consider it because it really feels like it's great against a lot of the top tier meta. So whatever you guys think about Vanity's Fiend, leave it in the comment section below. If you guys are enjoying these discussion videos, let me know that in the comment section below as well. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.